From Leonard, 3 reasons why we lost that football game. Number 1, missed a field goal. Number 2, penalties by Ed Gainey. According to TSN, 45 yards of a penalty on that touchdown drive. Third reason, defense was not aggressive enough. Calgary quarterback had too much time to throw the ball. That's from Leonard. I could go on, and I will with one more. Anonymous texter writes in, no CFL games on Thanksgiving Day. A 60-year tradition ends. Can we expect a Friday night Grey Cup soon? That's from Anonymous texter. And 3 Down Nation posted a column over the last 24 hours saying, no Thanksgiving Day games makes the CFL turkeys. So if 3 Down wants to know why the commissioner's office isn't really fans of 3 Down, that's part of the reason right there.
I agree with that comment, though. I'll comment on 2 of those. The first one, I think having a Thanksgiving Day game on Canadian Thanksgiving makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you think you're competing against the NFL on Sundays, you're right. But you're not competing in an afternoon on Monday of Canadian Thanksgiving with the NFL. So there should have been a game or 2 played, in my opinion, on that Monday. The second one, I think, was your first one that commented on discipline issues or penalty issues with some of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And he named off, I think, 5 players. And it's sort of unique to me that they were all defensive backs.
All defensive.
He didn't name anybody on the offense at all, and he didn't name anybody other than defensive backs. And I think for the most part, he's there's some truth to what he's saying, but I think he's probably gone a little bit too far. But by contrast, I watched the BC Lion game against Edmonton, and for those of us that watched that game, Duron Carter was Duron Carter, just being an idiot. And Glenn Suter, to his credit, was calling him out, saying that we got to get rid of that from our game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just made me really glad that we don't have Duron Carter anymore. But there were still some people doing some Duron Carter-like things, and those defensive backs that he mentioned in his text were some of them. So I think if the Riders can clean that up, I still think, and I'll get into my game predictions on In the Huddle, each week over the next 3 weeks, but I think the Riders have a really good chance to run the table. Mm-hmm. Because they're playing against a BC Lion team that looks like all the air's been taken out of that balloon, and they're playing against an Edmonton team that might be playing with their backup quarterback for one of those 2 or maybe both of those games. And the Edmonton games don't mean anything to the Edmonton Eskimos, but they mean a lot to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And I think the Calgary Stampeders are the best team in the Western Conference, but it's going to be really tough for them to win back-to-back against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So I think if the Riders can win out and Winnipeg wins one of those 2 games against Calgary, Saskatchewan still has a chance for first place. So it doesn't mean I think they're the best team in the Western Conference. I don't, but I still like their chances of being in the Western Final. And once you're there, once you're at the dance, anybody can win it. So those are my comments on those texts that came in.
Mm-hmm. Well, pause on that from the Facebook wall. Nashville and Saskatoon says, hey, Marshall, get a hold of me somehow. I got your money. And that is... that's integrity right there. You guys had a bet way back before the season began.
Yes, and can I comment on that one? Because I really appreciate Nashville reaching out to me, and it's been fun going back and forth with him all year on the bet. And for those of you that don't know what that was about, I predicted on the first show of the season that Hamilton would win first place in the East, and I challenged anybody out there that disagreed with me to bet me, and Nashville stepped up. But Nashville, I don't want the $100, but I want you to pay it forward. So I want you to find somebody that's less fortunate, and I want you to give it to them. Don't say where it came from. Just pay it forward, and maybe we'll have a bet next year.
Making miracles happen here. The Miracle on 84th Street. Did you hear the applause from here? These guys? Very nice of you, Marshall. By the way, speaking of giving, here's a gift card to Cora. Breakfast place for you and your lovely wife, by the way, for your appearance today. Thought I would throw that in.
Thank you very much.
And actually,
thank you, Cora.
Clark, somebody wrote in and said we picked somebody for on Friday to go to Cora. Did you get a hold of that person? Yeah. You did. It's all handled. Okay, great. So with 3 weeks to go in the regular season, I wrote in my column, I guess, yesterday that there's not a lot of intrigue left in the CFL because all the playoff spots have been sewn up. But maybe there is. I mean, if the Riders finish with 13 wins, which would be them running the table, that's an improvement over, what Chris Jones did last year in 12 wins. And please tell me how you don't vote for Craig Dickinson for Coach of the Year or Jeremy O'Day for GM of the Year or both. But at least out of the conference, at least out of the West. I mean, in the East, with what's happened in Hamilton and what's happened in Montreal, those are pretty amazing things too. So I guess that's what I'm watching for over the next 3 weeks because there's really nothing in the West, Marshall, that I think that's as intriguing as that, nor the East, really.
No, I think I said this maybe a couple of times over the last 4 or 5 weeks. I think the three candidates for Coach of the Year, not in this order, are Craig Dickinson from Saskatchewan, Kahari Jones in Montreal, and Orlando Steinauer in Hamilton. And each of them for different reasons, but clearly in my mind, Craig Dickinson is the West nominee if there was such a thing for the Coach of the Year. But I predicted pretty early on that I thought that this might be the first time in history that an interim coach is Coach of the Year in the Canadian Football League. And the way that Kahari Jones has turned around that Montreal franchise that I called a dumpster fire probably for the last couple of years under Kavis Reed. And Orlando Steinauer, although he inherited a much, much better team than Kahari Jones did, he's done a masterful job with that team as well. I mean, keep in mind, that's a team that's also been playing with their backup quarterback for the entire year. And, I think their offensive coordinator, name's escaping me, is done a wonderful job with that offense. Any one of those three choices would be a great choice this year.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned Kahari being interim coach, which he still has that tag, and he probably would be the first person to win Coach of the Year under that tag. It reminds me a little bit of the Stanley Cup Finals last year. Was Game 6 was in St. Louis? Yeah, it was. And they introduced the head coach, Craig Berube, the public address announcer at what used to be the Sava Center or Kiel Center. I don't know what they call it now, but and the Blues interim head coach, Craig Berube. And I'm like, come on! He took his team from last place to Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final, and you're calling him interim? And, of course, they removed that tag shortly into the offseason. Kahari might still be interim because they got no GM.
No owners.
No owners.
Although I think that's coming soon.
That's the rumor.
From what the rumor. So maybe we can ask Justin Dunk that one.
Yeah. Actually, get your question coming up in hour 2 from 3downnation.com. But I'll tell you what, if Kahari Jones isn't coaching in Montreal next season, he's probably writing his ticket to wherever he wants to coach.
All the other teams in the league are going to want him.
Right. Has he not proven his mettle as a head coach?
Absolutely. And not just as an X's and O's guy. He's demonstrated leadership. He's demonstrated a way to kind of bring the fun back to that football team, to get them playing together. I mean, you think of some of the antics. I mentioned Ron Carter's name earlier in the program. You just don't see that from a Montreal player. And they're taking on the character, as most teams do, of their head coach. And he's done a masterful job. I mean, if I had to pick between those three, they're all good choices, but I'd probably pick Kahari Jones.
Well, Michael, watching in Winnipeg this morning, Michael Girl says, hi, guys. Who do you see being the Eastern nominee for Coach of the Year? You can make a legit case for both Jones and Steinauer. So I guess we kind of just covered that. Nelson from Phoenix says, wouldn't look at Kahari as an interim coach anymore. He's gone out and earned that spot this season for sure, if not possibly a job in Toronto for him. And I like the segue you provide, Nelson, because we haven't had you on, Marshall, since last week's ground-shaking news that Jim Popp was fired as general manager of the Argos. Corey Chamberlain survives for now. I have a feeling that he will be back next year, depending what Pinball wants, but I could see those two working well together. I know them both very well. I could see that working. And John Murphy being named to the management group. I don't know if it's going to matter what happens over the next 4 games for the Argos. They've already been mathematically eliminated. Corey Chamberlain did say, however, that he would not accept a demotion to defensive coordinator only. It's head coach or bust, which I think is his right. I really do. Other coaches have done the same thing. But again, it's Corey's right to say no.
But who asked him that question?
Media. Who it was, I don't know. But
yeah. So if it's the media asking that question, I don't read too much into it. But if the general manager, if Pinball Clemens is asking him that question, then if I'm Chamberlain, I'm going, uh-oh. He already doesn't have full confidence in me right now. This is a train that's going the wrong direction. It's only a matter of time before it goes off the rails. So I don't know if I have a prediction on whether Chamberlain's going to come back next year or not, but I'll make another bet for Nashville or anybody else out there that wants to bet me. Kahari Jones will be a head coach in the Canadian Football League next year. And if it isn't with Montreal, it'll be with somebody.
Yeah. It's got to be Montreal, though, doesn't it? I mean, I know we don't know. I know they don't have owners, and then they're going to name a GM. But how do you not bring back Kahari Jones? You see what's going on in Montreal?
Well, I do, and hopefully the new owners do as well.
Yeah, well, we had the commissioner on here a couple weeks ago, and I'm somewhat dismayed in this. It sounds like those two Lenkov brothers, one an entertainment agent and the other, what's the other one, Darren? I don't know what they are. An accountant or something? They're going to buy the Alouettes. I would have liked to have seen the Montreal Canadiens buy them, just for financial stability more than anything, because I'll tell you something, folks. The word in the CFL is that the financial picture is very grim for a lot of teams, okay? And I just think stability with owner. You're never going to hear about Calgary folding. You're never going to hear about the Argos folding when MLSE owns them. I would have liked to have seen the Vancouver Canucks buy the BC Lions. Now, David Bradley's got more money than God. He's not going anywhere, but you get my point.
Yep.
These Lenkov brothers, it annoyed me a little bit that they were out on the field tossing the football back and forth with the players in warm-ups, and they say, we just like being around the guys.
What scares me about...
Super fans.
And I don't know the Lenkov brothers from the Smith brothers, but what scares me about that is because it's private, and I know that's sort of where you're going with the Montreal Canadiens being, a much more established, very, very successful franchise, is, you think back to McNall and Gretzky, et cetera, when they owned the Argos. Yeah, I think they won a Grey Cup under that, but before long, that thing just all fizzled right out. McNall's in jail.
Yeah.
Gretzky's still got lots of money, but when you have private owners, the impression I get is sort of they get in quick, get out quick. And that's not what the Canadian Football League needs. The Canadian Football League stability, as you said. They have it in franchises like Saskatchewan because it's a community-owned franchise. Yet they have it in the franchises that you mentioned for the reasons you mentioned. It would be nice to see that in Montreal as well.
Couple comments here before we go to break, and this is just making my heart sing. We were thinking of slogans last week. Here's one, Dupes. The Rod Pedersen Show, where Stampeders fans come to talk. What do you think? Because we got Ryan Ballantyne here. He's the Stampeders podcaster, blogger with a big, long red beard from Big Brother Canada. He says, I'd vote Kahari for Coach of the Year, but it should be Dave Dickenson for the Western nominee. And Ryan goes on to say, based on coaching caps, you can't fire anyone else, I don't think. So Kahari stays in Montreal. Well, Cal Murphy taught me this in the 90s, if I may. These rules are more guidelines. I don't think that's changed. So if it's better for some owners to get rid of a coach they don't want, they, I think, will look the other way. I don't think that's changed from 1990s CFL. And I'm saying we might be closer to 1990s CFL than you think. If the financial picture of what I hear is true, and I have no reason to think that it's not, they'll do whatever it takes. And then when I say Stampeders fans come here to talk, Doug Cameron in Calgary says, I concur, Ryan. Lose 11 of 24 starters from the Grey Cup roster, and Bo's out for 7 weeks, and we're still in first place. So, as the judge says, I'll allow it. Stampeders fans conversing on our Facebook wall. Mind-blowing.
He certainly hasn't done a bad job this year. But I think, generally speaking, Coach of the Year is awarded to somebody that's taken a poor or a mediocre franchise and turned them into a much better franchise. And you can certainly say that about the three names that we've mentioned. I don't think Dave Dickenson has turned them into a better franchise. He's just done more with less this year than he has had to in the past. I would disagree with one of our texters in there, though. I don't think firing a coach at the end of the year has the impact on the salary cap that firing a coach in the middle of the year does. So I think at the end of the year, that's when the deck gets shuffled, new salary cap year starts, and you start counting with the 10 coaches you got or whatever the number is, as opposed to some of the coaches. I mean, firing a coach in the middle of the year, you're going to pay him the rest of the year, and you're going to have to start paying whoever the new coach is as well. That gets you in salary trouble. But at the end of the year, I think at the end of the year, the bets are off.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.